Hello everyone, we're doing an out-of-box review, an unexpected one for most of you I suspect. I got a box, my hand is on it here, I'm going to move the camera in a second and put the camera on it. It's a rather large box. It might be better for me to sit on the floor and do it. I'll get some help from the felines because both Tomo and Thunderpaws are in the room with me. They seem to like to be with me. So it might be better if I just put the camera on the floor for this one because it's a large box. I'm going to try. I'm going to have to pause the camera for a moment and relocate. I'm going to see if I can put the camera on it, on the tripod, because I got a pretty big tripod, but it may not work. I need to start thinking about getting a new lens for the camera. I'll be back in a second. Well, it looks like I'm going to get away with putting it on the table, so no guest appearances by Tomodachi and Thunderpaws. Some of you are probably disappointed with that. It came from Compartment TV. My local hobby shop shut down, so I can't order stuff from him anymore. So I'm going back to online ordering. Starship, Modeler, Compartment TV, Federation Models, these people. I like to deal with them. Let me open this box. I am hiding my address. Compartment TV's address. I don't think he's going to mind being on there. I'm using some Gamers Haven business cards to hide my address. So I am opening this box live with you guys. I got a pin from Compartment TV. Interesting. Some of you already see what's in there. Invoice probably has my address on it. You guys don't need to see that. Some of you already can see what's in there. Is the Space 1999 22-inch Eagle kit. Okay. Celebrating 40 years, all new model kit. So let's get this out of the way. Let's get this model kit down here where we can see it. And the box just barely fits on that camera. Barely. It's a big box. It really is a big box going across here. Okay? For comparison, most of you know how big a car model box is. There's a comparison. Okay? It is as thick as the car model box. It's thicker than the car model box and much larger. So let me take a moment here and open up our box and let's see what's going on. Right, Mr. Paws? Mr. Thunderpaws is right there. Let's take a look at the side of it, though. Does it say what scale this is? I'm sure it does somewhere on the box, because round 2 is good that way. The camera angle's a little weird, so it's going to be a little hard for me to keep things straight. I have cardboard down on the table to keep things straight with, but it's not working. Crew compartment 2 to 10. Duration 80 hours. Acceleration 9G. Main motors 4 nuclear fission. VTOLS's 8 nuclear fission. Maneuvering 4 chemical rocket packs. So this thing does nuclear fission. It's nice to know how it's powered finally. After all these years, I've always wondered. Primary fuel, hydrogen slush, deuterium. Gravitational, 3 Mark 6B gravity generators, 2 primary, 1 standby. Fuel, nuclear deuterium. Primary power, dual stage nuclear fission reactor, enclosed system. Secondary power, 4 single rod nuclear power cells. Computer, X33 multitronic transistor system. Weapons, beam, 2 gigawatt lasers in the command module, 20 gigawatt laser in the companionway module. Defense, ablative armor plates, command modules, and surface coating. Spun titanium and aluminum is what the structure is made out of. Various composite materials, details classified. So that's what this little plaque says right here. Sometimes it's nice to know that stuff. This side of the box, it just has a little talk about the show and the guy that made the model, I'm sure. It is rare to be a freelance effects technician and achieve success in the film effects industry. Not always a smooth run, but I've worked for some amazing directors and producers. Yes, it's talking about the guy who did the special effects for Space 1999. The back of the box, they didn't leave anything, no real estate open here. They went over all of it. Okay. Has a deluxe accessory set featuring turned aluminum engine bells and landing gear struts. Okay, that costs more than the model itself. That's the only thing that bugs me about that, is that's over $100 for that. 300 parts, 2 plastic colors, and clear. It's researched for authenticity. You know I said that word wrong. I don't see any scale on this, but I don't see scale on here. It's going to be in the directions. Okay, I know it has a scale to it. It's probably like 1/24 or something like that. So let's open up the plastic. This one is not, well, it'll be sitting in the stash for a while, I'm afraid. When I retire, I'll start building down that old stash. Yeah, I will. Once I retire, and getting up in my years and having some time. Box lid set aside. We have a cardboard support in the center so we don't crush stuff with that. We have springs. The first thing I see is some screws and some springs. It has metal parts to it. Here is the clear glass for the cockpit and for the passenger compartment in the back. Pulling this out, we have 4 identical sprue here for the engine bells. There are 2 parts. That's the biggest worry I have with this kit, are those engine bells, to be honest with you. Okay. We have a bag of 2 sets of 2 identical sprue. Already getting an idea how big this thing is by looking at this. Oh yeah, here we go. Now you get a good idea how big this is. It's pretty good size. Okay. Piping. Structural. There's the pilots. This is smaller than 1/24, so it's probably 1/48 if I had to guess. The directions are in here, they'll say. The engine piping, more engine piping, and it looks like we got some nice piping in there. Doesn't look bad at all. We'll put them in the bags and take a look. There's so many identical sprues though, this will end up being a quick review. More piping, structural piping, and the back of the command pod. We have a little catalog here. We have a Decals sheet, and we will take a look at that in a minute. We're down to the directions. I like to start with the directions. It says white part, gray part, clear part, do not glue, paint and decal before proceeding, repeat, read first. I still don't see a scale on this, but I bet it's 1/48. There's a talk about the show here, design and construction, cinematography, your kit. This is based off the first Hero, the 44-inch model, and this is 22-inch. So, yes, exactly half size of the original miniature at 1/48 scale. So there you go. It is a 1/48 scale kit. 1/24, it would be big. It would be table size. Okay? And where would you put such a thing? Even at 22 inches, where are we going to put such a thing? That's the bad part with these big, large-scale models, is once you build them, where do you put them? Needless to say, let's get into these directions. Let's quit reading all that stuff. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm a big fan of how Bandai does their directions with the big fold-out book with a book-style directions. The big fold-out thing reminds me of maps when I was a kid, and Dad never folding them up, Mom getting irritated at that. You start with the passenger compartment. It doesn't look like the passenger compartment's overly detailed. And part of that is, we're right here. Let me get the box out from under it. How's that? So it's laying flat on the tabletop. And I can do a zoom in a little bit because we're looking at directions, which will never hurt anything to have a better zoom so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, now you start with the cockpit. It's not overly detailed, and the reason for that is you've got tiny little windows to see in the cockpit with. Okay, to show you this, let me find that cockpit baggie again. Now you will be able to see in the top and the bottom because it looks like it's clear on the top and the bottom. But if you look here, the window is not very large. Okay? So you're not going to see a whole lot of detail in there. So they didn't bother to provide much. You're going to be able to see the pilots. There was no real lighting to this kit, if I remember correctly. There wasn't. So you could do a little bit of lighting on the inside, but there isn't too much to do. And that's being honest, okay? Well, you start with that, and then the next thing you do is you do the outside details on it, okay? Now, someone, Jim Chaddick, I think his name is, I'm going to link to him in the video description so you guys can find him, has been building up a test shot of this. One of his ideas is to take and turn these into buttons, one of these into a button to turn on power for the model. So if you want to light your model, you could use these as a button, I guess. I would just put the button on the bottom of the passenger compartment. That's just me. Okay, so we get the passenger compartment done first. And you can work this in modules or sub-assemblies from what I gather. And it's looking that way as well. Over here we have the structural frame that goes across the top of the Eagle. Give me 1 second so I can point at some stuff. And I can show you what's going on. Okay, now, what I have in my hands is the old dinky toy. Okay? This thing has seen much better life, so to speak. It's pretty beat up, but you know, you can't be upset with having one of these, alright? Because they're pretty rare. Now, looking at the dinky toy, what we're talking about, the first thing you build is the command module up here. Then you start building the superstructure that goes across the center, the spine. Okay, we're building this part next. And that's what the directions are right here, to build that spine. And it looks like it's going to be fun because there are a whole lot of cross members that go together in this thing. A whole lot of them, and it is in multiple pieces. So that's going to take a bit of time to do. And then we start on this cage back here, the back cage. Okay? We're going to start on the back cage back here. And that's where the directions take us next, working on the power plant for the Eagle. Lots of piping, well, there's a big box in the center of it with lots of little detail piping added around the outsides to make it look more realistic. And then we finish that back cage right there. There's going to be plenty of details, plenty of areas for paint. The old dinky model doesn't have any of that. It's just a cage around a piece of metal. That's the good thing about these dinky models is they're metal. The legs are still spring-loaded. The doors still work on it. The landing gear, well, they've seen better days, and we're missing one there. But again, I just feel lucky to have that. After that, you start building the landing gear. Now, my understanding is they are not identical. The 4 pods that come off the sides are not identical here. So you have to be careful with it. In looking at it, I can see that they are not identical. Well, they looks kind of like they are, but the order reverses on the parts. Okay? So be careful that you keep things in the proper order as you build them. And then over here we do build the landing feet, and they are spring-loaded, so they'll have the same action that this dinky kit has right here. Okay? which is kind of fun. Realistic landing action. They're spring loaded. Now those springs on the plastic, you're going to have limited life on that, so I would be careful once you do that. Turning it over, you start building the rear engine assembly. You got lots of little tanks to put together, 4 of them, no 8 of them, and they go together on this big engine pylon. Okay? And then you get to the passenger compartment, which looks like it goes together really quickly. Once you get the passenger compartment together, and you got lots of little greeblies to go on there, and a big cage to go on the bottom, you can find a place to put a switch on the bottom of this thing pretty easily with that cage. This doesn't have the cage. Okay? Once you're done with that, the passenger compartment screws into the Superstructure cage, and I would be really careful with that one. You're screwing that in there, over tighten the screws, you're breaking it. And that's one of the things the guy that's building the test shop said, that he's going to replace those screws with something else, some heavier duty screws with some stuff in the back. The last thing you do are the engine parts, and well, if you're going to buy the aftermarket parts, you can get started building this thing and working on it and save that for last, because it looks like you can add those at the end pretty easily and swap them out if you wanted to. That's kind of smart on their part, I suspect. Okay? The engine bells come in multiple pieces. And again, they were never lit up in the show. And you have all these pieces you put on the underside and then the top side, and it looks like there's a rod that goes in there at the end from step 35. Nope, this whole thing is step 35. I don't know what that is. Okay? And then we have some interior parts that go inside the engine bells. So enough looking at the directions. This looks like it'll be a fun assembly, to be honest with you. Enough looking at the directions. Let's start tearing into the parts, and let's look at the parts of this thing so we know what we are getting into. Up first, let me find the decals, because the decals would be nice to look at. And I don't know, oh, there it is, it's hidden. There it is. So let's take a look at the decals that come with the kit. I don't think they're going to be too great. And I think most of it can be done with painting, because I don't remember the ship having a lot of markings. Oh, you got Moonbase Alpha decals, and you got lots of little tiny markings. So I am wrong on this. Lots of little tiny markings in here. It helps if you're on camera with that, doesn't it? There we go. Lots of Moonbase Alpha decals and lots of little markings. And if you wanted to black the windows out, you can. That's what all that is. So you can black the windows out. There we go. Okay. The Moonbase Alpha decals appear to be in different colors. So you have some that are just blue and white, blue, white, and orange. So they are in multiple colors. Okay. The decals look like they're registered well. Let me pick them up and take a look at the film. The film is right on, spot on with the color. So in other words, you don't have extra film hanging over the color parts. And if you're putting that on a, say, a glow ship model, you really don't want extra film hanging over the color parts. So I'm glad to see they did not do that with this model. Alright, since everything's pretty much white, I'm going to dispense with the piece of cardboard for a backdrop. And we'll start with the part I'm most interested in looking at. Maybe I should leave the cardboard for a backdrop so I don't cut up my table. Okay. I'm going to zoom the camera back out some. Okay. These two parts, these two sprue are identical. Looking at it, well, detail-wise, there isn't much detail there. We do have some detail that's looking pretty good right here. Let's see if the camera will do its macro thing. It is. We have some pretty good bolt detail up here at the top. Okay? But it doesn't have to have a lot of detail for these two parts. They just don't. Here are the some of the parts for the front and forward, the forward and rear boxes that contain the power reactors and stuff like that. And again, they don't have to have a lot of detail at the scale we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a pretty good scale. Okay? Yes, Mr. Thunder, I know. You want to be on camera. You want to be a star. We will include you. How's that? You're just going to have to wait a few minutes. Well, anyhow, there's these parts, and instead of what I did of pulling the part to the camera, I am going to just do a good zoom in here. I know you get a look at a nice black table for a moment. Now, this part, this bag, it's mainly just support rods to build that big cage with. There's that one part they were talking about for the engines. I don't know what that part is for, but it's there. The pilots, what's the detail like on the pilots? Well, we got a plastic bag in the way. How dare I do it that way? Let's open that bag, shall we? One thing you got to remember when you're doing things on camera, everything's reversed and backwards, so if I move it up, it's actually moving down. Okay, there's a good zoom on that pilot so we can see some detail there. Okay? And it has two identical sprue in this bag, so I'm not going to pull the other one. And you can see there's no need for any detail on the sprue other than with the pilot. There just isn't. It's just piping. That's all we have here is piping. Okay? It's really strange to look at the camera and move something around like that. Next bag, these are all identical sprue parts in here. And we'll go ahead and open this and pull one of these out because it has some nice piping in here. And again, all of these are identical sprue. Okay. Let's get in here. These are the parts right here that have the most detail on there. The piping is large enough that you're not going to have trouble. It's not like the Millennium Falcon from Bandai, where that piping is like a ½ millimeter in diameter. These are some big beefy pipes, so as long as you're careful, you're not going to go breaking them. It's just a matter of making sure there's no flash on them and they're round, because any flash on a pipe just kills it. And I am not really seeing any flash, and it is a half pipe, so when you put the two parts together, oh, that's not good in my opinion. Yeah, if you turn the part over, the side is flat. Not all of it. These are round pipes here, but these parts are flat where these are going to join up. So you have a potential seam problem along those little delicate pipes along there. Not a good decision on their part. I would rather you just glued these halves together and have the pipes all on one piece. But, you know, that's just the way it is. We have to work with that at times, don't we? We have to work with what we're given. Okay? Big tanks here. Seams on round parts really aren't that troublesome if you sand them correctly. They're really not. I've done a lot of that with various models over the last few years. All in all, the details are where they need to be. They don't have to be heavy and sharp. I mean, they don't have to be sharp because it's a large scale kit. And that's one thing that we have going here. It's a large scale kit. There's so much pipe work on it that you're not going to really be looking and saying, oh, I'm missing all this detail. There's a lot of pipe work. You're not going to be missing that detail. Let me open this bag up because we got some different sprue in this bag. It's one of the few that has a few different sprue. Get an idea how big the passenger compartment is. Here you go. The top and bottom of the passenger compartment where the screws screw in here. I can zoom out a little here because this isn't going to matter so much. And the zoom on this thing is just slow. These are just flat plates. That's all they are. Just flat plates. Zero detail on it. The only thing you have is trademark information, and that's so easy to remove. It's not even funny. We have ejector pin marks everywhere on these flat plates. And they are bad pin marks. Really bad. but most likely the plates look, oh, nope, they're not symmetric. Okay, they are not symmetric. So the top plate looks to be symmetric, so you could put this side up if you wanted to and get rid of the pin marks, but you got a nice, I got a nice tide line running right across here because it's a really big piece of plastic. Those are hard to avoid, but the bottom, we have 2 pins here. So if this is, the pins go to the interior, you got to remove those sink marks, and there's a lot of them. Hopefully those pins go to the exterior. Have to go back and look at the directions on that. Okay, in the rest in here is pretty much identical sprue. The only thing we have is the back plate for the command module. If I wait a little bit, the camera will focus on it. Okay, and identical sprue all the way across here, and this is where we get that cage that goes across the top of the passenger compartment. So let me put things aside so we can take a look at that. Okay. Here's the side panel with the door, the upper panel with the skylights. There's no interior to this that I know of. There will be eventually. You want to build it now, you won't have an interior. Here's the cage we were talking about earlier that runs across the top of the Eagle. There's half of the cage. Now this is rounded over on both sides. That's a good thing, so we don't have any seam lines running along there. And it looks like the flash is very minimal on it. There is some, but nothing you can't take care of very simply and easily if you are careful. Okay? And it looks like an axe right there. So if you have a medieval figure, you might be able to make that an axe. Bonus! Just kidding. Okay? There is one different sprue in here yet to cover, and then we'll move on. We're getting to the engine parts really quickly here. So let me set those parts aside. And looking here, we have piping. Yes, piping. A very large piece of nothing but pipe. On the other side, there are some locator pins. Okay, this goes on the underside of the passenger compartment. So it goes on the underside of the passenger compartment. So this is going to sit on there like that to give it some detail. And you are going to have thrusters on the bottom of that, if I remember correctly. Okay. And here we have the back wall of the command module. This is the interior of this wall. We have part of the cage for the thrust, the engine assembly. This one doesn't seem to have that cage, the dinky model, but that's okay. All right. So we had a look at what's inside that bag. 2 more bags to go. 3. I'm not going to open the clear bag though. This bag has 2 sets of identical sprue in it. So I can go through it pretty quickly. These are identical. Here we have the landing pods and the door for the command center. Again, there is no interior. They didn't even bother for an interior. So if you want an interior, you're doing some scratch building. And that's all I got to say there. It's time to get out your scratching skills. It does have clear windows. You would be able to see in there, so I'm kind of surprised there is no interior with it. You know, people will come out with it. That is the honest truth. Ooh, look at that flash there. But the flashing doesn't seem to be there. There are ejector pin marks, but the ejector pin marks are on the inside of these parts where you don't care. If you turn it over, you can see them. They're pretty heavy there. They use some pretty, I mean, there's black marks on these rings. That's kind of surprising. Okay? The ejector pin marks don't come through, so they don't come through on the side we care about. More flash on this. This is 2 sets of identical sprue. I have some spiderweb flash right there. Okay? Yeah, you can see it. On the reverse side, we have the ejector pin mark issue again. but they don't bleed through to the top side, so they won't be an issue on the top side. Now that's with mine. I don't know, other people might get something different. I've had that happen to me before where I open a box and there's some tide lines in there that just won't go away. And it ruins the whole model. You might as well just not build it at that point and use it for parts for other things, because it's just ruined. Now we get the landing feet and the gray parts and the engine bells, and all of the sprues in this bag are identical because there's 4 landing feet, 4 engine bells, you know, etc. The engine bells are 2 parts. Helps if you can see them. The engine bells are 2 parts. We have the back part and the front part. I'd rather that than be 2 halves. You know, split that sucker in half, and that's going to have a nasty seam to deal with. Having a round seam like this was a good call on their part. It means you could build these up fairly well. They're not very thick, so getting the aluminum parts, I don't know how useful that will be. Because here, let me bring it up to the camera so we get a better look at it. Okay? They're not very thick. You know, really, they're not very thick. So they're going to look plenty good on their own, just the plastic parts. The only thing I'm interested in is getting this out of metal, so the spring landing gear don't come apart on you really quickly. Okay? But having a look at this, it doesn't look too bad at all. Not really. And there's 4 identical sprue in that bag. Okay? 4 identical. And we get down to the clear, and I'm not going to open these because they are individually sealed by sprue in separate bags. The plastic isn't incredibly clear, but a dip in a pool of future will help fix that. And we have 4 springs and 2 screws in this bag. Okay, we have some loose parts floating around in this one, but that's just a piece of the sprue that broke right there. But it can scratch things, so I'm not going to move it around too much. Okay, I know the light glare has you, but you get the idea by looking at it. Looks to be a well done kit. You know, typical of the new retools from round 2s, they're getting better as they go. It's not Bandai quality or fine molds quality by any shape or means, but for what it is, it looks to be good. Okay, I'm not going to poo-poo this. I'm not going to say it's a bad kit. It looks to be a good kit. Anyhow, I hope you guys have had fun looking at this. You know, Thunderpaws wanted to be on video, so let me move the camera around a little bit so we can see Mr. Paws here. We're going to see his back because he is sitting in a chair here. Not a care in the world, actually. Thunder. Thunder. Ah, there you go. There's Mr. Paws. You're a star, Thunder. You're a YouTube star. Well, anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. I want to build something new. It might be this. It might be a Star Wars model. Seeing that the engine bells are the last step means I wouldn't feel guilty starting this. Scratch building an interior for it, it wouldn't be that hard to do. So that's something to consider. I will think about it because, you know, I'm almost done with a couple of kits. So I will have room to start something new. I will talk to all of you later.